Hello and welcome to Quality Time, the place where we spend quality time with my guests. My name is Habib, and today's guest is Mustafa Musayev, the guy who can tell us how incredibly dangerous and unpleasant it is to enter the newly built cars. But among all other things we will discuss, Mustafa, I wanted to start with something else. We were just discussing how important is the jacket in terms of the business scenarios. So I wanted to jump back on that conversation. So is it
Sure.
important or no?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me for this. We had great discussions in beforehand, and this jacket discussion, it kicked off really interesting. I would say jacket being important in business scenario. I would say yes, dependent on my age, because with 24, with 20 almost 24, I must showcase my expertise, and the first look, first glance on you, seeing the jacket is already giving the first impression of somebody more serious.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because like Mustafa here, is the CEO of a GISphere company, and they try to be a safe bridge between the business and the technology part, the engineers, especially in the new businesses like automotive and smart cities, and basically everything connected to new tech. He has a great experience with the cars, and that's why I invited him, because cars and this is my really something I really admire and afraid at the same time. That's one of the reasons why I invited him. But also, he's 24 and he's already having a successful company, because he shared his last project with me. Crazy, amazing as well. And yeah, then now we come back to the jacket. How can you be an expert when you're 24? Is it possible?
Um, I would say depends on the niche you're choosing. So the smart city technologies niche is something where I would say there are a very few experts, and smart city technologies are now developing. And the person who is more interested, thoroughly interested in what they do, they can be an expert in that field. I would say technologies were always a part of me, like from beginning on, from when I was a child. I was always interested in the newest models of the cars, what they could do, etc. And then it grew further for the IT interest for IT, where I started to study IT, and with the working with the newest programming languages. I remember even Python being developed and released back then. It's already years ago,
You're not that
and
old. Come on.
I still remember it.
Seriously, so it means, or maybe I'm that old. That's a reality check for me, okay? Okay, man.
Yeah, and therefore, smart city solutions. It came during the pandemic times, where our German company, where we're running also a family business here in Germany for the smart city and smart solutions, and therefore it came for the first time when we had to scan some a city in my hometown, Azerbaijan. We had to find solutions, go for more expertise. And since then, I was already invited for two collaborations with experts for talks, and also Intergeo conference, where I was allowed to hold three speeches for the last time. And also Science Magazine, where we also had a spot from our company to share the success story, which was also introduced by Hexagon Leica on their own blog.
Yeah, that's amazing. I met Mustafa, it was 2 years ago, right? It was
Last year.
something like
Last
that. Yeah,
last year in
last
Poland.
year. It was an event focusing on German Polish business, blah blah blah. But then this guy approaches the scene, and last year I remind I remind you not, he was a year younger. He had a jacket, so already I thought, okay, maybe he's an expert. But then he started explaining what he was doing, and first thing I remembered is that you mentioned that we were talking a little bit, and you mentioned you're here in place of your father. So I thought, oh, okay, let's give that benefit of a doubt. But you know how sometimes these stories begin, right? But then you entered the stage and you gave a really insightful presentation about the smart cities and the electrical grid, and then how they function and what is required. And it was very fresh, very innovative. And then I realized, okay, I'm already became an old prick who just, looks at the young guy and says, "Oh, he's too young to be an expert." But apparently, you cannot be an expert in smart cities if we don't really have smart cities yet. Or do we have smart cities already? Do we have anything that you would call smart city?
We have already a lot of smart cities actually around the globe. I would say the most developed cities are in the USA because they conduct their tests, not their tests, their scannings every day. They fly plane over every state, and then they gather the data, and they always update the data so that they have the most up-to-date data for the smart cities. But therefore the first question is always, what is a smart city? uh, yeah.
What is a smart city, Mustafa? Can you tell me in 3 sentences what can we call a smart city?
Very briefly, it's a city where every single thing happening is traceable, and the data can be analyzed and for the further development. Therefore, the first step is to create a 3D map of the city, so you have also got the heights of the buildings inside the city, and you already input the fourth dimension for the smart city, which is the time. And therefore we simulate the time and see how the vegetation will go, or where the overflooding can happen, so we can also have predicted maintenance in beforehand.
Okay, so it sounds a bit like a future dystopia, a little bit. But what's the upside of the smart city? What's the thing that really speaks for it?
The first thing where cities are more interested is probably money, and where what does it bring in this case. And this is where the stakeholders can, or the interested people who want to invest into the city, don't need to come to the city, don't need to fly from, I would say, for example, there's an investor from America who wants to invest in Barcelona in Spain. They don't need to do those CO2 emissions and fly over. They can just sit down at their laptop. They have the 3D model of the city, or maybe a place they want to buy, the direct thing. And they can also, like, if they want to invest into the governmental structures, like um, building new transformators for the electricity companies, then they can just send their data already to the stakeholders, and get already the yes or no through this, without even without the pollution of the plane. And it's very easy marketable, very feasible. And also for the predictive maintenance, in order not to pay later more for fixing something, you can just in beforehand predict it and spend a little money. For instance, we had one scenario with our client in Azerbaijan, where we were testing for the electricity cords and lines, and which tree could be a problem in the next 5 or 10 years. And we could simulate the growth of the trees around those cords, and check if the tree would fall on the cord, how much disruption there would be, and what would be in a second case scenario, what could be done.
That sounds great because this would be my other question. I understand how smart cities can benefit the businesses, right? And that's probably the most important because the money driver is the best driver of all. But above all, cities are for people. So I was wondering what the smart city could bring to a citizen in your eyes. Like, what would be the top 3 things the smart city could give its inhabitants?
First of all, safety. I mean, the smart cities at the moment, if we open Google and search for them, they're the safest cities around the globe.
Ah.
And the second thing I would say, as a car driver, it would be very beneficiary to see the live data of the traffic. And if you have a smart city, you would already gather the live tracking of where the traffic is much, and which roads could be driven better.
That's interesting. Um, but would you, in your, yeah?
It's just in my eyes it benefits also like the cities, because then they know which are the roads which are most commuted during which time. You get hot times, and you can predictively enlarge those roads, or maybe you can small the other roads because they're not getting driven as much. And this is where the traffic could be perfectly regulated if the smart city scenario is implemented correctly.
That's a very, very eager idea to be able to regulate the things that cause the most of the problems. But what I see in smart cities that the most, even in normal cities, the most of the problems are caused by people, not by, of course, falling tree on an electricity grid is a problem, but then most of the problems are caused by people. And I always wonder if we try too hard to regulate the human behavior, if it would really last, if it would make sense, if it wouldn't collapse. Because when you have people and you try to somehow force them to do something the way you want it, then they're gonna do completely opposite thing most of the times. Unless maybe you're in Germany, and I don't know if it's true, a true idea about Germany that they are very strict. But it seems if you put a red button that says "Do not push" at the very busy street, it will be pushed so many times.
Maybe you should use the reverse psychology and say you should press the button.
We should overthrow the smart cities by driving in the self-driving cars and obeying the rules.
I would say herefore there are some things which I see as a trend, like some applications developed which use gamification. And in this scenario they get reward systems for the users.
So the China system. Ah, you're going the complete dystopia.
The car developers, they use it for instance as a gamification for the smart driving and good behavior during driving, not pressing the brakes too hard, or not accelerating too harshly. This is something I remember where I was testing the Cadillac, the electric vehicle, and there you got rewarded for every single good break and everything, and you see like the small achievements in your account which you can share with your fellow Cadillac drivers.
That's very strange, right? Because it sounds silly when you say it. It sounds, oh, it wouldn't make me drive better, but somehow you then enter this vehicle and it gives you point, and it's such a dopamine carousel. It's very easy to get hooked on this, and then if you can share the results and you can compete with your friends, your fellow friends in Cadillacs, it's actually quite amazing how easily we can hack the brain to do the things we want to do.
And there in China, I saw almost every electric vehicle developer use this system for the achievements. And in here in Europe, we only have the Chinese brand NIO who uses this system, and the German brand BMW, who has a similar reward system for good driving behavior. And I would say it's becoming a trend to be developed more and more into the driving scenarios, and therefore also an idea of ours which for a project which we had, where we would bring people, anyone could download the application and could send the government directly some issues with a picture, and the picture would be already depicted into the layer which the government would have as a smart city, in the smart city scenario. And on this layer they would see, here in this street there is an issue with the electricity cord.
Okay, so I'm walking around and I see a big hole in the busy street. So I make a picture, I send it through this app, and then instantly they understand what's going on. And now they see, not only see that the traffic is worsening there, but they have the cause. They see, okay, on this street we have a hole, so you don't have to send a vehicle, you don't have to send people, you just have this instantly. And it actually is very funny because you do it as a citizen because you actually want this thing to be repaired. So it's mutual benefit. It's very amazing. I really like that project. So let's circle back to the automotive again, because I really wanted to talk to you about the automotive industry, and you had a very interesting project involving a lot of manufacturers. some of which you cannot name, but could you let us know a little bit more about the project and how it went?
It was what I can say about the project. It was for a car manufacturer here in Germany, and we had to check for the mobile applications of the cars, how they interact in different scenarios, and how they compare between each other in order for the client to develop their own application much further. And it was very interesting because I got insights from three different markets with three different completely different focuses, I would say. Whereas you see China being very proactive, community, having like being the driver of the one car brand gives you like exclusivity to some stuff within China. For instance, if you own a shop, you could just give exclusive deals for the other car drivers which drive the same car as you. Uh, yes, whereas in USA there was no brand interaction, but more customer care and like putting most of the effort into how people are getting taught on fixing their car, and this was a big focus for the USA. Whereas in Europe, it's very different depending on the brand of car you're driving.
Are we far ahead over China with the application, or is it other way around? Are they just, killing it with great applications?
I would say in the mass, China already overstepped Europe from the app development because there are much more opportunities to do with your own car than within the in Europe, and even the app they implement in Europe, the Chinese car brands, they have to delete a lot of features, and they don't use lots of features they actually have in China.
So, what is like the three most interesting things you could do with your car by the app in China that you cannot do in Europe?
I would say firstly the ratings for the cars. You could rate the car you drive for so the other drivers could see is it beneficial to upgrade or not. This was all introduced by different car producers. Um, the second features would be the personalization and the shortcuts within the application. So where Apple has already the shortcuts integrated, but the apps integrate the same different scenarios within the app. So if you press the button, it would know that you are at home, and then it should turn off the lights and be ready to charge. And the same thing I would also say for the Apple shortcuts, where it already will location based understand what to do with the car, but it's also a lot of input from the user, and not a lot of cars have this feature, but if they have it, it's very versatile. So you can say if I am at work and the charger is plugged in, you can start charging 2 hours before I drive away to home, and this is all trainable through the application.
Okay, so advanced scenarios that really make the difference because these are everyday things that you need to do and then you need to remember, or you have to go through this automation process within Apple or Android phone, and it's just hideous. But then the app can learn through this. Very interesting. The one thing I liked the most that you mentioned, the one thing that I really loved was pretty simple. You mentioned that in one manufacturer allowed you to rent a drone and a camping equipment from the app. This was crazy for me. It was so convenient.
And there are a lot of different inconvenient things to rent from them, just inconvenient things just because there are different scenarios where you could have use of it. And there are also American brands which already integrate some camping equipment within their car which they produce, and give away something like the speakers which are given within the car which you can take out while you're camping just to listen to music.
That's great. Overall, if you would say how well the world is with the smartification of the car, how would you rate it?
dependent on the manufacturer. That we are already pretty far ahead, but there are still a lot of opportunities which can be done with the cars, and this is just shown by how by the amount of unique features you see within the applications, where there will be scenarios in the future we will 100% have all those features within all the apps. But at the moment, some manufacturers are ahead in one scenario and the other manufacturers are ahead in another scenario. So if combined, we are pretty far. It's just it will take time for all manufacturers to develop what they want.
Okay. Big businesses, big corporations, so it just takes time. What would be the best feature that you would like to have in a car, in the app?
I'm a big fan of the smart parking system of one of the German manufacturers, which is like something very unique, where you just leave the car at the parking station and just press the button, it goes and parks itself somewhere and comes back also whenever you enter the parking lot. And I think this is a feature which could be implemented based on not only one manufacturer but for all of them. There are already scenarios for parking where you just have a joystick and can park the car, but the car driving away itself somewhere where it's free and coming back, it's very time convenient, of course, because you don't have to park the car. You just get out of the car and go do your business and the car parks itself.
Yeah.
And I would say time is the most I would say important currency we have.
Yeah, basically it solves a lot of issues, but also I can think of, because normally I do software testing, so my company specializes in different scenarios, and the first scenario I can think of is that once you have a car that can park itself, everyone would get right before the staircase, the entrance, and try to leave the car, so it would park. And then right now you already know that, okay, maybe the entrance is the place where I cannot park because it's always too busy, so I will park 2 streets ahead, for example, right? So this could create additional problem of traffic jams, because everyone would try to get to the one place because they know they can get there, they can exit the car conveniently right in front of the entrance. And we are lazy as humans, we are so lazy, so you would just go there to the entrance, go into the building, and then leave the car to do the rest. But also hundreds, thousands people behind you would do the same. So I think that this might be very interesting issue that will arise, and we will solve so many problems. But on the other hand, it seems like we also create so many other things. Do you think that eliminating the driver would help?
There are some scenarios where eliminating driver just cannot be convenient enough, I would say. But autonomous driving is in some scenarios, like for instance, for 3D mobile mapping, it's perfect because you just start the car, it goes, it scans, it will always have the same speed. So you don't have to have the driver who just checks who is accelerating and driving, but the car does it by itself. And meanwhile, you can gather the data and already comprehend it and start working on it. I would say in this scenario, autonomous driving is actually very convenient.
Okay. And what about the communication, like buses, things like that, taxis?
It sounds very interesting, but it sounds also very futuristic. And I would say very futuristic is very scary at the moment. Laying your own security into an AI or machine learning system, which could not have one scenario which could happen, not programmed into it, could bring to a lot of troubles. And I think it is very time consuming to prepare those AIs to in order to comprehend which scenarios could happen.
Doesn't it seem like a big thing? Every year we would hear the next year we will get the self-driving car, and then the next year comes, and then we're still driving the car. And you can call it autopilot, but it's not autopilot, because you always need to be there, and it's only good for so many use cases. Do you think it's even possible to create a self-driving car within reasonable amount of time, like in 5 years?
I would say 5 years is more or less where it will start to with with the good concepts of the self driving. We already have some concept, but I wouldn't say they're enough percent safe in order to for them to be a good concept. But I would say in 5 years we will already see good concepts, because in 5 years there are a lot of scenarios which can be tested and which can be input into the data set of the autonomous driving module, and therefore it seems very possible for me.
Hmm. I like that you mentioned so much the safety. It's always something that I look for when I hear people talking about technology. You usually somehow don't hear that much about the security and safety, and it's really heartwarming that someone in the automotive industry looks for the safety. It's actually quite important. I wish we heard this a little bit more, because I was attending some car manufacturing events, and of course they show beautiful technology and they mention about the safety, but in the way that I feel unsafe. So that's something to think about. Car manufacturers don't get lousy with the safety. I hear it's not that good. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, how did you come to this place? Because surely it's not a childhood dream to, work in a car industry. So what was your childhood dream?
Isn't it though? I
Or maybe it is actually.
I
If I hear it, yeah, it seems like. But what was your childhood dream?
That's a very good question. I remember myself having those old lousy TVs where when you stepped more further to them, all of your hair would start going up. So like the old TVs, and I was viewing the Discovery Channel as a child all the time, and there was this one show called Top Gear, which also transformed to another show nowadays on the Prime TV, where three men were just taking some interesting cars, testing them, riding them around, and give feedback about them. And this was just my small dream to work with cars and to be always with the newest cars. I would say with 23 I accomplished it.
Yeah, so it was your childhood dream, and you're working your dream. Great, man. It's perfect. But didn't you had like more standard dreams to be a firefighter, to be I don't know, sportsman? It was always cars. That was something that was
I
interesting.
mean, to be a football player, but I threw it away very quickly because I just understood that I was not made for it. But otherwise, I always remembered those different TV shows about the cars, and I was just sitting there. During the time, I wasn't allowed to go out as a child. I was just sitting and watching them instead of some animated movies, where the people just got some old cars, repaired those, and then sold it for much more money, or testing cars or some other stuff. And it was very interesting. I even had like very thick encyclopedia about different cars, starting from 1900, the first 4T model, up until the modern for that time.
You should have a talk with your family, because it sounds like they programmed you to work with cars. It's so funny. It's so funny to see how influential can everything be, right? Because you basically watched it your whole childhood, you dreamed about it, but now you're doing it, so it's great. So Mustafa, what are the top three things that let you be in the place that you are right now? What helped you? Because you're quite young but already successful. You already had a big projects supervised by big companies that were quite satisfied with the work. You already did so many things, and I don't believe it's just the luck or just the case that it happened. So I wonder, what are these three things that helped you be here right now?
Good question. The first, just before we started this podcast, we had a really interesting discussion about books, and I mentioned this one book, Good to Great, from Jim Collins, and he says in one of the chapters, "Right people on the right bus at the right time." And I think I just hopped on the right bus at the right time in order to be at the right place at the moment. And there are different factors which led me to the work I'm doing at the moment. But a big thing was when I got supported by my parents and by my family when I was dropping out of the university. They just go on and work at our German company and to lead the projects where I also got their back when I was leading the project. Just not just like it's you're my son, you have to do it this way, but also in a way that you have the freedom. You are the project manager. You should manage it. I just want to see the results, the positive results. I don't want to be involved into routine job. That's the sentence I got to hear, and therefore I also felt the responsibility. And I would say taking the responsibility is one of the big factors which helped me to grow to this stage, to also comprehend the responsibility for every single thing I do and every single word I say. Working with different big stakeholders, as you mentioned, or even if government structures or car manufacturers, it's just there are a lot of different factors which helped, but it has never been a standard way of finishing school, going to university, go work with one company for several years and then do this. It was every information gathered through different steps of my life and comprehended into one place.
Thanks for the answer, but when somebody is listening just to this, they would summarize it as, a luck, being in the right places, but, and I think it's humility is a great attribute, and you have a lot of it, but then it's not so easy, and I believe that it's very hard to explain why the hell am I here. And I had this conversation with one of the CEOs of the big hosting company, and he said, well, when you have an interview, you always make something up so it sounds nice, but then you feel that you cannot actually explain it because it's so many little things and little decisions and circumstances, and there's a lot of luck, but there is also like underlying intuition that you have to do something. And I really liked what he said because it seems that intuition is much better explanation than luck, because luck it's not quantifiable. Of course, I'm very happy to be have the company here in Poland, in European Union. It gives me a lot of advantages, but then there's also intuition, and it seems that you had a lot of intuition in your life about what you should do next. And I was wondering if you know where this intuition comes from. Is it from the knowledge? Is it from observing your father because you worked with him a lot? Is it from reading books? Where does intuition come from?
You cannot summarize it again in just one sentence and say the intuition comes from here. There are, of course, some knowledge I gained from books, from the universities I've been to. I see my father as an example who also is doing his own business and working in has worked in different areas. And therefore, I would say there are a lot of factors which influence me to be at the place at the moment. But the one thing you said, that luck cannot be quantified, it's very hard thing for me to believe, because I have read also in the book, again, from the Good to Great from Jim Collins. It seems like a small advertisement. It's just, there are a lot of business scenarios I've read there which were very interesting. The Gillette company, which we know is huge nowadays, was almost bankrupt, and they just hired an intern manager, which was just at the right time there in order to push the marketing they have planned in beforehand, which was almost dropped. And if it was dropped, then they would have never been as big as nowadays.
It's very, because if you ask me, I would also say, oh, a lot of luck. I actually didn't do anything special. I have a lot of luck in my life, and I'm very grateful and thankful for it. But then when I try to look into those scenarios, I really try to understand what we call luck. And many times, if you look, for example, at the Gillette or Apple or Tesla, or these companies that we know that are successful, if you look closely, there is one thing that I can that is common between them, and for me it seems it's lack of fear. So they make some decisions that are unintuitive or unreasonable many times. They shouldn't be made if you just look into books and finances. They You have to have a lot of guts to make those decisions, and they are usually very hard to make, and not many people would go that direction. Most of the people would take another safer path. So yeah, right people at the right moment, of course, but it seems like a right person can find the right moments. Do you know what I mean? It's like you stand in a river, and you can either walk through the river and look for fishes, or you just stand there and there will be a fish that will swim very close and you can catch it. And that's how we used to play when we were young. We were just doing that. It was very fun. But then I realized that there are many people who have the guts to make decisions that no one else wants to make, but they make it right the moment the decision is required. But before that, they just calmly wait for the luck to appear. It seems like there's something more than luck to it.
I would say the Apple, as an example, they always wait with the technologies. In my opinion, the foldable phones are already the sixth generation for Samsung, and they are like in the thoughts of producing the first Apple foldable phone. And I think it's also a big example of when the iPhone 10 was produced, iPhone X. They were the first producers of a phone with no button, with the no physical button in the middle. So they have gotten a little bit more conservative at the moment. Before the glasses came out this year, the Apple.
Yeah, the VR stuff from Apple. Yeah.
It's mixed reality because you see the reality in the back, but you also have the virtual reality. The Microsoft HoloLens had already three different generations, and people weren't as hyped as if the Apple has dropped it, because Apple waits until the technology is settled down and it is already feasible to use, and then it comes into the phone into their production. I would say this is their strategy at the moment.
They pinpoint the right moment, because the right moment is not the moment the technology is made. It's very funny. I was having a lot of discussions because it really connects to testing and usability part of things. And the problem with technology is that all the people would say, we want the new shiny thing, we want the very latest technology. But then when you give it to them, oftentimes it's too new or too too yeah, it's too new to be useful for them, because most of the people want the same thing but slightly better. So it needs to have the feeling of being shiny and new and innovative, but it has to be just slightly different. So you have the time to adjust. So if you look at the Apple, it's a perfect example of great implementation of the idea of small changes, of increment changes. Because if you look at the iPhone, let's say 6, and iPhone 13 or 14 or 15, it's two completely different things, right? But if you look from the number to number, 12 to 13, 13 to 14, it's almost the same phone. There's nothing new in there, right? So how come from 12 to 15 it seems like all the same, just a little bit better camera, a little bit better that, a little bit better that. But if you look back, it's completely different phone, and it's the same. Like iPhone 4 already had this button, right? Our iPhone 6, almost similar phones, but then it switches, and it seems that they really capitalize on the right moment. They wait until the technology is familiar, it's known, it's useful, it's not innovative, it's safe to mass produce, it's cheap to mass produce, and then they come in with the marketing, showing people how you can integrate it with their whole infrastructure of Apple. And I think that's brilliant. That it's very surgical. It's very well thought. It's amazing that people would look at the Apple as innovative brand for innovative people, but somehow if you start looking into things, okay, foldable phone, they were late. The mixed reality, they were late. What else? The camera important in the phone, late. Because they had shitty cameras for quite some time.
The software, even the widgets, they introduced widgets 4 years after Android first introduced them.
Everyone was late. And even if you look at the smartphone, it's not the first smartphone. First was Nokia with its with the Symbian system on the Nokia phones. It was multi-threading. Yes, it ran multiple applications. You could install them. You could have a shop. You could basically install the office office applications. You could work from your phone, but people didn't realize that it can run multiple applications in the background. So what happened is that many people were having these new phones and they were slowing down a lot. So they were giving them back and wanting some, old phone that they knew. And then I think based on that, Nokia just disinterested or discontinued any interest in smartphones, and they were always thinking, even when they saw the iPhone, the first iPhone, I think that they were laughing and they were sure that people will not buy it at all, and they really missed the moment, because if they continued, I think they would be the best manufacturer and the first one, because they had always the best technology, the best cameras, which are very important right now, the best specialists, the guys from Finland. But then, they were too early. Not the right bus or not the right moment, right?
Yeah, but the Apple was at the right moment there, and therefore they overtook the market, I would say, and they started producing through Samsung. The displays we have on the iPhones at the moment, made by Samsung, because Samsung is also preparing it for their own phones. Why do it yourself if there is someone who can do it better than you? This is therefore I'm also a big fan of outsourcing, because there will be an expert who can do it better than you. And having the mixed vision of yours and someone who can implement it with you together, I think this is also somewhere where you should put your ego a little bit aside and let someone who can do it much better do it, because he will maybe take less time than you to finish it up, and then you can work on more suitable work for you.
Yeah, I like that thought. So let's make an experiment. So of course you cannot mention the brand you were working for in the automotive industry, but if you try to think of them doing the job that they ordered from you, would it be even feasible? Because you said you traveled to 3 different markets. How many car manufacturers were included in the comparison?
Around 30.
30 cars manufacturers. Okay. So
25, but there were some which crossed over. We had this scenario where if they would simulate it and try to do it the same, the problem is that they would have to go through a whole process. No matter which car producer, they would have to go through a whole process of creating a new department for it, who would check for it. And instead of that, you just pay money for someone else to do it and give you the final data. And you already have data for working. You don't have to recruit anyone. You don't have to create anything new. It's very feasible, and it's very easy for them, or for any business.
It's crazy, right? Because these big brands are so big that it seems like choosing a new supplier of paper clips requires a whole new department to decide, to test, to see the compliance. And then you can go to a small third-party company and say, we want you to choose the best paperclip supplier, and they will do it in 3 days, for the 1/10 of the price or 1/100th of the price.
It's like they just keep the responsibility for themselves, but they also give a part for others, just for concentrating on more important things. It's basically having a plan on what is more important for you to do, and what you can put on for others. Is it more beneficial to give money and get the product, or is it better for you sit down and you do the job? There's like the differentiation I also always make when I was doing the website for our company. I was like, should I just pay the money for the person who can do it, or is my knowledge of front end enough, and the time I would consume I would put in enough to do it? I then chose to do it myself, because at the time I would spend would be bring me the same money as if I wouldn't would hire someone and give him the money.
Yeah, the return on investment is always the nice way to calculate if you should do something or you should outsource. But the one thing I wanted to ask you, we spoke about it briefly, not naming it, and that's innovation. And I wanted to ask you, what, in your opinion, drives the innovation?
Mm, innovation is something you maybe there will come something come out there will be something tomorrow which we wouldn't think about today. We will need it. Innovation is some, I would say, vision which was implemented and it helps people to get more lazy.
Interesting. So I always like to, at the end of the interview, I always like to play this little game where I give you a hypothetical glass ball where you can try to see the future. And I would like to hear what are the three innovations you see in, let's say, 20 years from now.
Good question. I would say the one innovation I would see directly is a portal for every citizen where they can view their city, and they can see everything live which is happening in the city, and which street is overfull, which street is has more capacity to park, etc. Without leaving your home, you already know what's happening in your city for the citizen. This is like in the cadastral way very also beneficial for the citizens, and is being implemented already somehow in Finland. There are already for Smart City Helsinki. There are some use cases which are very good, but I can imagine it for the whole world to be a thing. Um, Second thing, maybe faster traveling time and faster. There will be some solution for maybe faster planes or cars which will fly. I don't know, but there will be a solution in 20 years which will bring us from point A to point B much faster than we are used to right now. It could also be maybe different road infrastructures. I could see that coming, but at the moment, the melting pot is getting bigger and bigger, and us people, we are around everywhere. Like different people are in different places, and the transfer of the knowledge and exchange of it's becoming more and more important. And the third thing I would see upcoming, good question, maybe integrated phones into our body could be the case, or maybe phones having completely different role, and the communication becoming something completely different, a different device. Because we are, even though our phones are getting bigger and bigger, but the smartphones are having more functions than just having a call, and they don't really. When was the last time you had the call with your phone?
No, I hate those freaks who call on the phone. It's not for that. Smartphone is completely not for calling. It's a completely ridiculous idea to call anyone with your smartphone. Let's stop it. Completely doesn't make sense. It's for something else.
I would say smartphones are getting more and less important for giving a phone call, and I would say there will be a smaller technology which would be much more feasible for calls, and instead we would have smartphones just for social media and everything which is popular at the moment and will be also popular at that time. Taking pictures. We don't have big camera. We don't see a lot of cameras at the moment. We just see people getting out their newest iPhone or newest Samsung with the or let me tell, one of the BBK One Plus with the integrated Leica camera. I have already a Leica camera. I can take a picture. Why should I take camera with myself? So we have a multifunctional thing in our hand, and therefore I think it will gain more and more opportunities to use, and whereas the phone calls will get used by some other device.
Hmm. It's a very interesting view of the future. Um, yeah, I always hope it doesn't go into the dystopian area because it sounds all great, but I can think of many cases where it just goes sideways. But then there's the other question: what are the three biggest dangers you see in the 20 years connected to technology?
Related to technology, the dangers. Which the thing that is getting more and more popular is introducing a product which is not finally ready and which hasn't been feasibly tested. And I think it's getting more and more popular. I had a discussion with my friend who's working for another German company. He says that their data is getting stolen by another company, which is not finally tested. The product isn't produced. They get the project, they produce it, and they sell it directly without testing, because for the other companies it's easier just to get the stuff they want, the which was like I would say planned but not finished yet, in order than having a product which was tested and 100% said that it is feasible and can be used. I think this is one of the big things that can be very dangerous in the future, which is about technologies. The Chinese EVs are also something which weren't tested a lot and are already on the market. And if there are if an alternative to the batteries come out, what will happen with the old batteries which were produced for the electric vehicles? This is a question which is also a very big thing, which is upcoming for the next 20 years, I think. And I would say there was those are I think there were two, three. I said already. I think these are.
I think it was two. I want one more. Yes. One more thing that scares you and that could happen in 20 years connected to technology.
Less person interaction, because everything you already can have an AI bot call people for like cold calls and everything, and everything is already getting automated by AI. And I think that the more and more usage of AI just brings away the human factor, which was always a point. And I think it can get lost for a moment, but it will regain its value, because in some places you cannot replace a human with a computer.
So it's not a lost cause after all. It seems we are more connected but less connected, if it makes sense. I don't know. Sounds silly. Great, man. Now I know I can add this to my nightmares. Thanks. It was very insightful. Yeah, very scary stuff, especially with the batteries. That's something that's coming, and it's already the problem. I think that most of the manufacturers say that the EV car is they are unable to resell the used EV car, that they can sell the new one, but reselling is very hard for them. And I think 80% of the manufacturers said that it's becoming a problem. But that's just random article I read over the internet, so I wouldn't give it a full interest. It's something I probably need to verify. Nevertheless, it's very scary. But also this connection, I think it goes with the benefits you mentioned. You said that miniaturization and new, better ways of calling, connecting will come and they will be introduced. And then paradoxically, it can make us less connected or less interacting with each other. So
It's a very difficult thing to I would say comprehend in first hand, because when the internet was introduced and people could connect more, we also had this dilemma that we're connected less to each other in the real life, but are more connected through the internet. But if we gain more I would say soft skills through communicating, then it doesn't matter how you gain it. In my opinion, it's more beneficial that you gain those skills. And therefore, if there will be an opportunity for me to gain them much easier than rather than sitting in front of my desk and doing the online courses or go or maybe having courses at some place, then I would of course choose those because efficiency is something very important. And as I have mentioned beforehand, time is the most valuable currency we have. So the less time I have to spend in order to become a master at something, of course I would use it because I want to be efficient, and I want to produce this knowledge in order to monetize it.
Do you think if we get really good at miniaturization and implanting ourselves with technology, do you think the idea of like a global connected awareness, is it something possible in your opinion, that you just join the network directly with your brain, directly connecting to the hundreds thousands of users at the moment, sharing the experience?
For now, it's of course something not imaginable, but maybe if we talk about it in 10 years where we have more data about it, I would say yes, because AI is also something, it's more simple than people actually give it a credit for. It's just a machine learning which can interpret. It has so much knowledge that it can use it in different scenarios. So maybe if there will be this connection connected to another technology we already use, it will be much more feasible for us also to understand and to comprehend it.
Okay, definitely. Let's talk about it in 10 years then. But for now, thank you very much, Mustafa, for joining us today. Thank you very much for listening and have a great evening ahead.
Thank you. Wish you all the
Bye-bye.
best. Thank you. Bye bye.